Captain Marcus Chen had been drifting in space for 3 days when the massive alien vessel found him. His emergency pod's life support systems were failing, oxygen running dangerously low, and the cold void seemed ready to claim another human explorer. The sleek ship that rescued him was unlike anything in Earth's databases. Crystalline structures merged with organic curves, pulsing with bioluminescent veins that seemed almost alive. When the airlock cycled open, Marcus found himself face to face with beings that challenged every assumption humanity had made about alien life. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted between deep purples and silver. Their eyes were large and multifaceted like precious gems, and delicate antennae crowned their elongated heads. Despite their imposing size, they moved with fluid grace, their 6-fingered hands gesturing in what seemed like a complex language of movement and light. The ship's captain, who identified herself as Commander Lyrelai through a translation device, explained that Marcus had been found in neutral space between the Zephyrian Empire and the hostile Krex Dominion. The Krex were a warrior species that had been pushing deeper into Zephyrian territory for months, leaving devastation in their wake. Marcus learned that his own ship had been destroyed by a Krex patrol while he was conducting routine mineral surveys in what Earth thought was empty space. As Commander Lyrelai showed him through the ship, Marcus marveled at the advanced technology surrounding him. The walls seemed to breathe with life, and energy flowed through visible conduits like blood through veins. The Zephyrians had achieved a perfect fusion of biology and technology that Earth scientists could only dream of. Plants grew integrated with control panels, their roots forming living circuits that responded to touch and thought. However, Marcus sensed an underlying tension among the crew. Their movements were hurried, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with what he was beginning to recognize as anxiety. When he asked Commander Lyrelai about their destination, her antennae drooped with worry. They were racing to reach the capital world of Zephyros Prime, where Queen Azura lay dying from a mysterious illness that had baffled the Empire's greatest healers. The Queen had been struck down 3 weeks ago during a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. What started as a minor ailment had rapidly progressed into something that seemed to attack her very life essence. The royal physicians had tried every known cure, but nothing worked. Some whispered it was poison from Krex assassins, while others believed it was a curse from ancient enemies. Whatever the cause, the Queen's condition continued to deteriorate. And with her death, the Empire would fall into chaos just as the Krex prepared their final assault. Marcus listened to these explanations with growing interest. As a former military medic before becoming an explorer, he had seen many strange ailments during humanity's expansion into space. Earth's medical knowledge was different from what the Zephyrians possessed, cruder in some ways, but perhaps that difference might prove valuable. He found himself studying the data the crew shared about their Queen's condition, noting patterns that seemed familiar yet distinct from anything in human medicine. The ship shuddered as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and through the viewing portal Marcus saw Zephyros Prime for the first time. The world was a stunning mixture of floating cities connected by bridges of living coral, vast oceans that glowed with phosphorescent life, and towering spires that reached toward 3 moons hanging in the purple sky. It was beautiful beyond imagination, but even from space he could see the signs of a civilization in crisis. Military vessels patrolled in tight formations, and emergency lights pulsed from the major population centers. As they approached the royal palace, a magnificent structure that seemed to grow from a massive underwater reef, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He approached Commander Lyrelai and offered his services as a human healer. His knowledge might be primitive by Zephyrian standards, but sometimes a fresh perspective could see solutions that expertise might miss. The commander's multifaceted eyes studied him intently before she slowly nodded. They had tried everything else. What harm could come from one more attempt? The palace's medical wing was a marvel of organic architecture, with healing chambers that resembled giant flowers and treatment pools filled with luminescent waters. Marcus was escorted through corridors where worried nobles whispered in their musical language, their bioluminescent patterns dim with grief. The air itself seemed heavy with the weight of an empire watching its heart slowly fade away. When they finally brought him to Queen Azura's chamber, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She lay in what appeared to be a living bed of coral and soft moss, Her usually brilliant scales now dull and gray. Her breathing was labored, and the gentle light that normally emanated from healthy Zephyrians had dimmed to barely visible flickers. Royal healers moved around her with desperate efficiency, applying treatments that Marcus could see were having no effect whatsoever. The Queen's antennae twitched as she sensed his presence, and her large eyes opened to focus on the strange alien who had been brought before her. In that moment, Marcus saw not a mighty ruler of an interstellar empire, but a being facing the same universal fear that plagued all intelligent life, the fear of death and the sorrow of leaving loved ones behind. Her weakness was evident, but there was still a fierce intelligence burning in those gem-like eyes, and something about her indomitable spirit reminded him of the human explorers who had first dared to venture beyond Earth's atmosphere. Marcus knelt beside Queen Azura's resting place, ignoring the shocked gasps from the royal healers. In human culture, such informality before royalty would be scandalous, but something told him the dying queen needed to see him as an equal, not another servant. He gently placed his hand near hers, careful not to touch without permission, and spoke directly to her through the translation device. "Your Majesty, I am Marcus Chen of Earth. I know I am just a primitive alien to your people, but I have seen death many times, and I have learned that sometimes the simplest solutions work where complex ones fail. Will you allow me to examine you with my crude human methods?" Queen Azura's voice was barely a whisper, but her words carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Human Marcus Chen, my healers tell me your species still cuts open bodies with metal tools and uses chemicals to fight disease. Such barbaric methods should not work where our advanced biomedicine has failed. Yet," she paused, struggling for breath, "death makes equals of us all. You may try." The royal healers protested in their musical language, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with indignation. How could their sophisticated treatments be abandoned for the primitive techniques of a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel? But Queen Azura silenced them with a weak gesture. She had ruled for over 2 centuries and had learned to recognize opportunity even in desperate circumstances. Marcus began his examination, with tools that seemed absurdly simple, compared to the living medical instruments around him. He checked her pulse with his fingers, listened to her breathing, and studied her symptoms with nothing more than careful observation and basic medical scanners from his emergency kit. The Zephyrian healers watched with barely concealed contempt as he performed these crude procedures. What Marcus discovered puzzled him greatly. Queen Azura's symptoms reminded him of something from his military medical training, but it was elusive, dancing just beyond his memory. Her cellular structure was breaking down, but not from any toxin or pathogen the Zephyrians could identify. It was as if her body was forgetting how to maintain itself, losing the basic instructions for life that every living being carried in their genetic code. "Tell me about the diplomatic mission where this began," Marcus requested. "What exactly happened during those final days before the illness struck?" Commander Lyrelay provided the details. Queen Azura had been negotiating with the frontier colonies about refugee settlements for those fleeing Krex attacks. The meetings had been intense, lasting long hours without proper rest. On the final day, she had insisted on personally visiting a refugee camp despite security concerns. The conditions were harsh. Overcrowded shelters, poor sanitation, and desperate families who had lost everything to the war. As Marcus listened, a terrible suspicion began forming in his mind. He asked for detailed scans of the Queen's nervous system, specifically focusing on areas that controlled autonomous functions. When the results came back, his worst fears were confirmed. The pattern was unmistakable to someone trained in human military medicine, even if it manifested differently in Zephyrian biology. "This is not a disease," Marcus announced, causing shocked silence in the chamber. "Queen Azura is suffering from severe radiation poisoning, but not from any normal source. This is quantum radiation exposure, the kind that affects the basic information structures that hold living matter together." The royal healers erupted in debate. Quantum radiation was theoretical at best, and their sensors had detected no such energy signatures. How could a primitive human identify something their advanced equipment had missed? But Marcus was already requesting specific tests that Zephyrian medicine had never considered necessary. When the results confirmed trace amounts of exotic particles in the Queen's bloodstream, the room fell silent. Marcus explained his theory. The refugee camp Queen Azura had visited was built near the wreckage of ships destroyed by advanced Krex weapons. These weapons didn't just destroy matter. They corrupted the quantum information that organized living cells. The refugees had been slowly dying from exposure without anyone realizing it, and the Queen's extended contact during her visit had concentrated the effect in her system. "Your medical technology is incredibly advanced," Marcus told the assembled healers, "but it's designed to work with natural biological processes. This quantum corruption is attacking the fundamental code that tells your cells how to exist. Your treatments can't fix what's been scrambled at the information level." The challenge was enormous. Earth's crude medical techniques were useless against such exotic damage, and Zephyrian biomedicine couldn't address the quantum-level disruption. Queen Azura was dying from an injury that existed at the intersection of physics and biology, requiring a solution that neither species possessed alone. Marcus spent the next 18 hours in intensive consultation with the royal healers, combining human understanding of radiation treatment with Zephyrian knowledge of cellular regeneration. They needed to find a way to reset the corrupted quantum information while the Queen's body still retained enough coherence to rebuild itself. It was like trying to repair a computer virus by rewriting the operating system while the machine was still running. The solution, when it came, was brilliantly simple and terrifyingly dangerous. Marcus proposed using the ship's quantum navigation computer to generate a precisely calibrated field that would effectively reformat the damaged information in the Queen's cells. However, the process would require someone to remain in direct contact with her throughout the procedure, serving as a biological template to guide the reconstruction. The quantum field would be deadly to whoever took on this role. "I volunteer," Marcus said without hesitation. "Human cellular structure is different enough that I might survive the exposure long enough to complete the process. Besides, I'm already dying slowly from Krex radiation I picked up when my ship was destroyed. This gives my death meaning." Queen Azura's eyes met his, and in that gaze Marcus saw something that transcended species barriers. Here was a being who had spent her life making impossible decisions for the greater good, recognizing the same quality in him. Her consent was given not with words, but with the slight nod of a ruler who understood the weight of sacrifice. The quantum regeneration chamber was hastily modified to accommodate both human and Zephyrian physiology. Marcus watched as the royal engineers worked with desperate efficiency, their bioluminescent patterns flickering between hope and fear. The device looked like a fusion of advanced physics and living art, crystalline matrices intertwined, with organic conduits that pulsed with contained energy. Word of the human sacrifice had spread throughout the palace, and nobles gathered in the corridors to witness what many believed would be the death of both their queen and the strange alien who had offered his life for hers. Commander Lyrelay stood nearby, her large eyes reflecting complex emotions. In the short time she had known Marcus, she had come to respect his courage and quick thinking. Now she was watching him walk willingly toward almost certain death. As Marcus prepared for the procedure, Queen Azura insisted on speaking with him privately. Despite her weakness, she managed to convey the weight of what his sacrifice meant to her people. "Human Marcus Chen, if we both survive this, you will have earned a place in Zephyrian history that no outsider has ever held. If I survive and you do not, I swear by the light of our 3 moons that your name will be remembered as long as our civilization endures." The procedure itself was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. As the quantum field activated, he felt his very atoms resonating with energies that existed beyond normal space-time. His hand remained in contact with Queen Azura's, and through that connection, he could sense the damage spreading through her cellular structure like digital corruption destroying a vast database. The field began its work, unraveling the scrambled quantum information and allowing it to rebuild according to proper patterns. Pain beyond description coursed through Marcus's body as the exotic radiation tore through his human cells. His nervous system screamed warnings that his brain could barely process, and he could feel his own life force being consumed by the effort to maintain the connection. But something extraordinary was happening. Where his human cellular template touched the quantum field, it was creating stability patterns that the Zephyrian biomatrix could follow to repair itself. Hours passed in a blur of agony and determination. Marcus could feel Queen Azura's life signs strengthening even as his own grew weaker. The royal healers monitored both patients with growing amazement as the queen's corrupted cells began rebuilding themselves according to their original genetic programming. The quantum field was working, but at a terrible cost to the human who served as its anchor. As dawn approached on Zephyros Prime, something unexpected began happening. Instead of dying from the exposure, Marcus's human biology was adapting to the quantum field in ways that defied explanation. His cellular structure was being rewritten by the same energies that were healing the queen, creating new patterns that had never existed in either species. He was becoming something entirely new, still recognizably human, but enhanced by quantum-level modifications that would have been impossible through any normal process. When the procedure finally ended, both Marcus and Queen Azura collapsed into deep unconsciousness. The royal healers worked frantically to stabilize them both, their scanners showing readings that challenged everything they understood about biology. The queen's condition was improving rapidly, her cells rebuilding themselves with perfect efficiency. Marcus, meanwhile, was undergoing changes that their instruments could barely measure. Queen Azura awakened first, her scales once again brilliant with healthy iridescence and her bioluminescent pattern strong and clear. She immediately demanded to know the condition of the human who had saved her life. When the healers admitted they were uncertain whether Marcus would survive the transformation he was experiencing, she ordered them to use every resource at their disposal to ensure his recovery. Marcus finally regained consciousness 3 days later, to find Queen Azura sitting beside his recovery chamber. Her presence was the first thing he saw, and he was struck by how different she appeared now. Not just healthy, but somehow more vital than the medical record suggested she had been even before her illness. Her eyes met his, and he saw profound gratitude mixed with something that might have been affection. "You have given me my life back, Marcus Chen," she said softly. "More than that, you have given my people hope in our darkest hour. The quantum field changed you just as it healed me. Our healers say you are still human, but enhanced in ways we do not fully understand. Your lifespan has been extended, your physical capabilities increased, and your mind has been touched by the same quantum awareness that guides our most advanced technology." Marcus sat up slowly, marveling at how different he felt. His body was stronger, his senses sharper, and he could perceive energy patterns that had been invisible before. Most remarkably, he could understand the Zephyrian language without the translation device, as if the quantum field had created neural pathways that bypassed normal learning processes. He was still human in every way that mattered, but he had been transformed into something that could bridge the gap between species. The political implications of his survival quickly became apparent. News of the human who had defied death to save their queen spread throughout the Zephyrian Empire like wildfire. Citizens who had never seen an alien before spoke his name with reverence, and military commanders who had dismissed humans as primitive began reassessing their assumptions about Earth's potential as an ally queen. Azura made her first public appearance since her recovery at Marcus's side, addressing her people from the great balcony of the royal palace. She spoke of courage that transcended species barriers, of the bonds that could form between very different forms of life, and of the human who had proven that strength came in many forms. The crowd's response was overwhelming. Bioluminescent displays lighting up the city as millions of Zephyrians celebrated both their queen's recovery and the alien hero who had made it possible. As the ceremony concluded, Queen Azura turned to Marcus with a proposal that would reshape both their destinies. "Marcus Chen, you have earned the right to return to your people as a hero, carrying with you the eternal gratitude of our empire. But I offer you another choice. Stay with us as my advisor and companion. Help me lead our people through the war that approaches, and together we will show the galaxy what can be achieved when different species choose cooperation over conquest." Marcus looked out over the celebrating crowds, then back at the remarkable being who had already become far more to him than just an alien ruler. His answer would determine not only his own future, but potentially the fate of two civilizations standing on the brink of either alliance or annihilation. Marcus accepted Queen Azura's offer without hesitation, knowing that his decision would ripple across the galaxy in ways neither of them could fully predict. Within days, he was officially appointed as Royal Vizier, a position that had never before been held by an alien. The announcement sent shockwaves through Zephyrian society and beyond. with some viewing it as revolutionary progress while others saw it as dangerous precedent. The Krex Dominion's response was swift and brutal. Their war fleets accelerated their advance towards Zephyrian space, with intercepted communications revealing their commander's fury at the alliance between species. To the Krex, who believed in the absolute superiority of their own kind, the idea of a human serving as advisor to an alien queen was an abomination that demanded immediate correction through overwhelming force. Marcus threw himself into understanding Zephyrian military, doctrine, and political structures. His enhanced cognitive abilities, a side effect of the quantum healing process, allowed him to absorb information at an incredible rate. He studied battle reports, analyzed enemy movements, and immersed himself in the complex diplomatic relationships between the hundreds of worlds that comprised the Empire. What he discovered was both impressive and deeply concerning. The Zephyrian Empire was indeed technologically advanced and culturally sophisticated, but their approach to warfare was fundamentally defensive. For centuries, they had relied on their superior biotechnology and energy shields to protect their territories rather than engaging in aggressive expansion. This strategy had served them well against conventional enemies, but the Krex were unlike any foe they had previously faced. The Krex Dominion operated on principles that were antithetical to Zephyrian values. Where the Zephyrians sought harmony between technology and biology, the Krex pursued pure mechanical perfection. Their ships were massive geometric constructions of metal and energy. Their weapons designed not just to destroy, but to completely erase their targets from existence. Most disturbing of all, they had developed quantum weapons that could corrupt the very information structures that held matter together, the same technology that had nearly killed Queen. Azura Marcus proposed a radical shift in strategy that drew from his knowledge of human military history. Rather than waiting for the Krex to reach Zephyrian core worlds, he suggested taking the fight to them using tactics that combined human aggression with Zephyrian technological superiority. The idea was controversial among military commanders who had never considered offensive operations outside their own territory. "Your Majesty," Marcus explained during a war council, "humans learned long ago that the best defense is often a good offense. The Krex expect you to retreat behind your defenses and wait for them to overwhelm you through sheer numbers. Instead, we strike at their supply lines, disrupt their communication networks, and force them to fight the kind of war they're not prepared for." Queen Azura listened to his proposals with growing interest. The bond between them had deepened beyond mere gratitude. They had developed a working relationship built on mutual respect and complementary abilities. Where she provided wisdom and political insight, gained through centuries of leadership, he offered fresh perspectives and innovative solutions that challenged conventional thinking. The first test of Marcus's strategic approach came when Krex scouts began probing the outer defenses of the Lyrian system, a key junction point that connected 12 inhabited worlds. Traditional Zephyrian tactics would have involved strengthening the system's defensive installations and preparing for a siege. Instead, Marcus convinced Queen Azura to authorize a preemptive strike using modified Zephyrian bioships equipped with human-inspired stealth technology. The attack was a stunning success. Zephyrian vessels, their living hulls adapted to absorb and redirect enemy sensor beams, materialized seemingly from empty space to disable the Krex scout fleet before they could transmit their findings. The bioweapons Marcus had helped develop didn't just destroy the enemy ships, they infected their computer systems with organic viruses that spread throughout the Krex communication network, providing valuable intelligence about their fleet positions and battle plans. News of the victory spread throughout both empires, but the reactions couldn't have been more different. Zephyrian worlds celebrated their first offensive success against the Krex, with bioluminescent displays visible from orbit as entire planets expressed their joy. The Krex response was pure rage. Their high command branded Marcus as a war criminal and placed an enormous bounty on his capture, declaring that no alien should be allowed to corrupt the purity of interspecies warfare. As victories mounted, Marcus found himself becoming a symbol of resistance that extended far beyond the Zephyrian Empire. Other species that had suffered under Krex aggression began reaching out, seeking alliance with the Queen who had elevated an alien to her inner circle. The tentacled philosophers of Rigel, the crystal singers of the Vega system, and even the nomadic Star Wanderers began sending diplomatic missions to Zephyros Prime. Queen Azura recognized the opportunity these overtures presented. With Marcus serving as her cultural translator and strategic advisor, she began building a coalition unlike anything the galaxy had seen. An alliance based not on dominance or conquest, but on mutual benefit and shared resistance to Krek's expansion. Each species brought unique capabilities to the growing confederation, creating a whole that was far greater than the sum of its parts. However, success brought new challenges that tested both Marcus's resolve and his relationship with Queen Azura. Conservative factions within Zephyrian society began organizing opposition to what they saw as dangerous foreign influence in their government. They argued that Marcus, despite his heroism, remained an outsider who could never truly understand Zephyrian needs and priorities. Some even suggested that his influence over the Queen had grown too strong, that he was manipulating her for his own species' benefit. These political tensions came to a head during a crucial vote in the Zephyrian High Council regarding the proposed alliance with the Crystal Singers. The debate was fierce, with traditionalists arguing that involving more alien species would dilute Zephyrian culture and compromise their military effectiveness. Marcus found himself defending not just his strategic recommendations, but his very right to participate in Zephyrian governance. Queen Azura's response to these challenges revealed the depth of her transformation since Marcus had entered her life. Standing before the assembled council, she delivered a speech that would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. She spoke of strength through diversity, of the evolution that occurred when different forms of life chose cooperation over isolation. Most importantly, she publicly affirmed Marcus's position at her side, making it clear that opposition to him was opposition to her crown. The vote was close, but the alliance proposal passed. As the council session ended, Marcus realized that he and Queen Azura had accomplished something unprecedented. They had begun reshaping galactic politics through the simple revolutionary idea that different species could work together as equals. The Krek's dominion, built on principles of supremacy and conquest, would soon face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. A coalition united not by fear or force, but by shared hope for a better future. The coalition's first major test came sooner than anyone expected. Krek's High Command, recognizing the threat posed by the growing alliance, launched a massive offensive against 3 coalition worlds simultaneously. Their strategy was brutal in its simplicity: overwhelm the defenders with superior numbers while demonstrating to potential allies that joining the coalition meant certain destruction. Marcus coordinated the defense from the Royal Palace's war room, a living chamber where bio-neural networks processed battlefield data faster than any conventional computer. Queen Azura stood beside him, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through complex configurations as she communicated with fleet commanders across dozens of star systems. Together they had become an unprecedented command team. Her centuries of wisdom guiding his innovative tactical thinking. The battle for the Kepler mining station became the pivotal engagement that would define the war's future direction. The station orbited a gas giant where the Crystal Singers had established harvesting operations for the exotic materials that powered their reality-shaping abilities. 3 Krek's battle groups converged on the system, confident that their quantum weapons would easily overwhelm the mixed fleet of defenders. Marcus had anticipated this attack and prepared a surprise that drew from both human military history and advanced coalition technology. As the Krek's fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they found themselves facing what appeared to be a standard defensive formation. However, hidden within the asteroid field surrounding the mining station were ships from 6 different species, each equipped with weapons specifically designed to exploit Krek's technological weaknesses that Marcus had identified. The engagement began conventionally enough, with Krek's dreadnoughts unleashing devastating quantum bombardments against coalition shields. But as their attack reached its peak intensity, Marcus sprung his trap. Zephyrian bioships released clouds of adaptive nanoorganisms that began consuming the exotic matter cores of Krek's weapon systems. Crystal Singer vessels used their reality manipulation abilities to create spatial distortions that deflected quantum beams back at their sources. Most devastating of all were the human-designed gravity mines that Marcus had convinced Earth's government to secretly provide weapons that created localized black holes capable of tearing apart even the largest Krex vessels. The battle was over in less than 6 hours, with 2 Krex battle groups completely destroyed and the third retreating in disarray. But the victory's true significance lay not in the tactical success, but in what it demonstrated to the galaxy. For the first time, the seemingly invincible Krex dominion had been defeated by coordinated effort between multiple species. The message was clear. Unity could overcome even the most overwhelming individual strength. Queen Azura's response to the victory revealed how much her perspective had evolved since Marcus entered her life. Rather than simply celebrating their success, she immediately reached out to the survivors of the defeated Krex fleet with an offer of mercy that shocked both her own people and their enemies. Speaking through quantum communication channels, she offered medical aid to wounded Krex soldiers and promised fair treatment for prisoners of war. This gesture of compassion toward their enemies was revolutionary in galactic politics, where warfare between species typically ended in complete extermination of the defeated. Marcus supported the Queen's decision, drawing from human historical examples of how mercy toward enemies could sometimes plant seeds for future peace. Many Krex commanders rejected the offer, but some, particularly those who had witnessed the Coalition's superior coordination, firsthand began questioning whether their Dominion's philosophy of absolute supremacy was truly the strongest path forward. The political ramifications of their victory extended far beyond the immediate military situation. Within weeks, diplomatic missions from previously neutral species began arriving at Zephyros Prime, seeking membership in the growing coalition. The quantum monks of the Andromeda Gateway, the hive minds of Proxima Centauri, and even representatives from the enigmatic machine Intelligence Collective expressed interest in joining the alliance. Marcus found himself thrust into a role he had never anticipated, serving as the coalition's chief diplomat and cultural interpreter. His unique position as both an outsider to galactic politics and an insider to Queen Azura's government made him the ideal mediator between species with vastly different values and communication methods. He developed translation protocols that went beyond mere language to address fundamental differences in how various species perceived reality itself. The growth of the coalition created new challenges that tested Marcus's relationship with Queen Azura in ways neither had expected. As more species joined their alliance, the Queen faced pressure to democratize decision-making rather than maintaining the traditional Zephyrian monarchy. Some allied species refused to accept orders from a single ruler, regardless of her wisdom or Marcus's counsel. Marcus proposed a solution that drew from human political theory while respecting Zephyrian traditions. He suggested creating a coalition council where each species had equal representation, but with Queen Azura serving as the first among equals, a ceremonial head of state whose authority derived from consensus rather than birthright. The proposal was controversial among traditional Zephyrians, who saw it as diminishing their queen's rightful power. Queen Azura surprised everyone by embracing Marcus's proposal wholeheartedly. In a speech before the first Coalition Council session, she explained that true leadership meant knowing when to share power for the greater good. Her willingness to sacrifice some of her authority for the sake of unity became legendary throughout the alliance, cementing her position not as a conqueror, but as a unifier who transcended the traditional limitations of single-species governance. The new political structure faced its first major crisis when the Hive Mind Collective demanded that all coalition military forces be reorganized according to their efficiency-based command principles. Their representatives argued that individual decision-making was inherently inferior to distributed consensus processing, and that the coalition's military effectiveness suffered from relying on single commanders like Marcus. The debate that followed revealed deep philosophical divisions within the coalition about the nature of leadership and individual versus collective decision-making. Marcus found himself defending not just his own position, but the fundamental principle that diversity of thought and approach was a strength rather than a weakness. His arguments drew from human history's examples of how innovation often came from individual insight challenging conventional wisdom. Queen Azura's support during this crisis demonstrated the depth of trust that had developed between them. When Hive Mind representatives suggested that she replace Marcus with a collective consciousness interface, She firmly refused, stating that the coalition's greatest strength lay in its ability to synthesize different perspectives, rather than homogenizing them into a single approach. The resolution came when Marcus proposed a hybrid command structure that incorporated elements from all member species' military traditions. Strategic oversight would be handled by collective analysis of battlefield data, but tactical execution would remain with individual commanders who could make rapid decisions in changing circumstances. The compromise satisfied most parties, while maintaining the flexibility that had given the coalition its early victories. As the first year of the coalition's existence drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how far he had traveled from the dying human explorer rescued from the void. He had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a being who served as a bridge between species, helping forge alliances that had been thought impossible. But he also knew that their greatest challenges lay ahead, as the Krex Dominion prepared for a final assault that would determine whether diversity or supremacy would shape the galaxy's future. Intelligence reports arriving at Coalition headquarters painted a terrifying picture of what the Krex Dominion was preparing. Their high command had withdrawn most of their scattered fleets to a massive shipyard complex in the Veil Nebula, where they were constructing something the Coalition's spies could barely comprehend. Preliminary data suggested a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems, powered by technology that seemed to violate known physics. Marcus studied the fragmentary reports with growing alarm. The weapon appeared to be based on quantum field manipulation on a scale that dwarfed anything previously imagined. If the intelligence was accurate, the Krex were building a device that could unravel the fundamental forces holding matter together across light years of space. A single deployment could eliminate not just worlds, but entire solar systems, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of disconnected atoms. Queen Azura convened an emergency session of the Coalition Council, where representatives from 43 different species gathered to confront their greatest crisis. The chamber where they met was itself a marvel of cooperative engineering, space where beings who breathed different atmospheres and perceived reality through entirely different senses could interact safely. Quantum translators converted not just languages, but entire conceptual frameworks, allowing species with radically different thought patterns to achieve true communication. The debate that followed tested every diplomatic skill Marcus had developed. Some species advocated for immediate preemptive strikes against the Krex shipyards before the weapon could be completed. Others argued for negotiation, believing that even the Krex might be reasoned with when faced with the Coalition's united opposition. The quantum monks proposed abandoning the local galaxy entirely, using their reality-shifting abilities to relocate Coalition worlds to parallel dimensions where the Krex couldn't follow. Marcus found himself in the unique position of translating, not just between languages and cultures, but between entirely different approaches to existence itself. The Machine Intelligence Collective processed decisions through pure logic matrices that evaluated billions of probability scenarios in nanoseconds. The Crystal Singers made choices through harmonic resonance patterns that reflected the fundamental frequencies of creation. The hive minds reached consensus through distributed consciousness networks that shared thoughts at the speed of light. Somehow, Marcus had learned to bridge all these different modes of thinking. His quantum-enhanced neural pathways allowed him to process multiple conceptual frameworks simultaneously, finding common ground between species whose basic assumptions about reality were utterly incompatible. He had become, in essence, the Coalition's living translation matrix, a being capable of finding unity within diversity that should have been impossible. The breakthrough came when Marcus proposed a strategy that incorporated elements from every Coalition member's preferred approach. Rather than choosing between attack, negotiation, or retreat, they would pursue all three simultaneously. Military forces would prepare for direct assault, while diplomatic channels explored every possible avenue for peaceful resolution. Meanwhile, contingency plans would be developed for evacuating critical populations if all other options failed. Queen Azura's role in implementing this complex strategy revealed how profoundly her leadership style had evolved since Marcus joined her court. Instead of issuing royal decrees, she served as a facilitator who helped different Coalition factions coordinate their efforts. Her centuries of experience provided wisdom and perspective, while her partnership with Marcus ensured that innovative approaches weren't overlooked due to traditional thinking. The diplomatic initiative yielded unexpected results when a faction within the Krex military hierarchy reached out through secret channels. These Krex officers, led by a commander named Thrakdur, had witnessed the coalition's victories and begun questioning their dominion's fundamental assumptions about species superiority. They proposed a meeting to discuss possible alternatives to the total war their high command was planning. Marcus and Queen Azura agreed to the dangerous rendezvous, meeting Thrakdur aboard a neutral station in unclaimed space. What they discovered challenged every assumption about Krex psychology and motivation. Thrakdur revealed that the Krex Dominion's aggression wasn't driven by inherent evil, but by fear. Terror that their technological superiority was the only thing preventing other species from enslaving or destroying them. The Krex had encountered coalition-style cooperation once before, millennia ago, when a group of species had united specifically to resist Krex expansion. That ancient alliance had been corrupted by power and eventually turned into an empire that oppressed the Krex for centuries before finally collapsing. The current Dominion's aggression was rooted in determination to prevent such subjugation from ever happening again. This revelation transformed Marcus's understanding of the conflict entirely. The Krex weren't monsters seeking conquest for its own sake. They were a traumatized civilization so terrified of becoming victims that they had committed themselves to ensuring no other species could ever threaten them. Their quantum superweapon wasn't intended for conquest, but as the ultimate guarantee that they would never again face extinction at alien hands. Queen Azura's response to this information demonstrated the wisdom that had made her one of the galaxy's most respected leaders. Instead of dismissing Krex fears as unjustified paranoia, she acknowledged their historical trauma, while pointing out how their current course would inevitably create the very scenario they sought to avoid. By threatening to destroy entire species, they were forcing those species to unite against them, recreating the same pattern that had led to their ancient subjugation. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Marcus served as both translator and psychological mediator, helping Krex representatives understand that the coalition's diversity was a source of strength rather than weakness. Unlike the ancient empire that had oppressed them, the coalition was specifically designed to prevent any single species from dominating others. Thrakdur was eventually convinced, but he represented only a small faction within Krex leadership. The majority of their high command remained committed to completing their superweapon and using it to eliminate the coalition threat permanently. Worse, intelligence reports indicated that they had discovered the secret negotiations and were accelerating their construction timeline. The galaxy had perhaps days before the weapon would be operational. Marcus proposed a desperate final gambit that would require everything the coalition had learned about cooperation and trust. Rather than trying to destroy the Krex weapon through military force, they would attempt to capture it intact and turn it into a symbol of unity rather than destruction. The plan was audaciously complex, requiring perfect coordination between dozens of species with radically different capabilities and methods of operation. Queen Azura looked into Marcus's eyes as he outlined the proposal, seeing there the same courage that had driven him to risk his life saving her. She realized that their partnership had evolved far beyond the traditional relationship between ruler and advisor. They had become something entirely new, a fusion of different perspectives and abilities that was greater than either could achieve alone. The Queen's decision to authorize Marcus's plan would determine not just the outcome of their war with the Krex, but the future direction of galactic civilization. Success would prove that cooperation could overcome even the most overwhelming challenges. Failure would likely result in the complete destruction of every world that had dared to believe in the possibility of peace between species. As coalition fleets prepared for what might be their final battle, Marcus and Queen Azura stood together, ready to face whatever destiny their choices had created. The assault on the Krex shipyard complex began with a deception that required perfect coordination between 43 different species. Coalition fleets appeared to be launching a conventional attack from 3 directions, drawing Krex defenders away from their most critical installations. While massive battles raged in the outer system, a small strike force consisting of Marcus, Queen Azura, and representatives from each coalition species approached the superweapon through the chaos of the nebula itself. Marcus had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying every piece of intelligence about Krek's quantum technology and working with coalition scientists to understand how their superweapon might be captured rather than destroyed. The device was enormous, a crystalline structure the size of a small moon surrounded by energy matrices that bent space-time around them. Getting close enough to board it would require passing through fields that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. The solution came from an unexpected source, the tentacled philosophers of Rigel, who existed partially outside normal space-time, and could guide the strike team through dimensional shortcuts that bypassed the weapon's defenses. Queen Azura had insisted on leading the boarding party personally, despite Marcus's objections. Their quantum-enhanced bond had taught them both that some challenges could only be met by facing them together. As their small craft materialized inside the superweapon's core chamber, Marcus felt the full weight of what they were attempting. The chamber was vast beyond imagination, filled with quantum processing matrices that hummed with barely contained energy. At its center stood the weapon's control nexus, a fusion of Krek's technology and something far older, artifacts from the ancient empire that had once oppressed their species. Krek's defenders moved to intercept the boarding party, but they found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered. The coalition team didn't fight as separate species. They functioned as a single organism with dozens of different capabilities. Crystal Singers created barriers of hardened light, while hive mind warriors coordinated attacks with mechanical precision. Zephyrian bioships provided living cover that adapted to enemy weapons in real time, while human-designed explosives targeted structural weaknesses that conventional weapons couldn't reach. Marcus fought his way toward the control nexus alongside Queen Azura, their movements perfectly synchronized through the quantum connection they shared. They had become something unprecedented, two beings from different species functioning as a single consciousness when necessary, yet retaining their individual perspectives and abilities. The Krek's defenders, trained to fight isolated enemies, couldn't adapt to opponents who shared thoughts and intentions across species barriers. When they finally reached the weapon's control center, Marcus discovered something that changed everything. The superweapon wasn't entirely Krek's technology. It was built around artifacts from the ancient oppressor empire, devices that the Kreks had salvaged and weaponized. These artifacts contained quantum consciousness patterns from billions of beings who had been enslaved by that long-dead civilization, their life forces trapped within the crystalline matrices for millennia. Queen Azura gasped as she realized the implications. The Kreks hadn't just been victims of the ancient empire, they had become its inheritors, perpetuating the same cycle of oppression through technology that still contained the screams of countless enslaved souls. The superweapon drew its power not from conventional quantum fields, but from the suffering of beings who had been forced to serve their conquerors even in death. Marcus made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of trying to capture or destroy the weapon, he began working to free the consciousness patterns trapped within it. His quantum-enhanced neural pathways allowed him to interface directly with the ancient technology, communicating with beings who had been imprisoned for so long they had forgotten their own names. The process was agonizing. Thousands of different voices flooded his mind, each one carrying memories of enslavement, torture, and despair. But Marcus persevered, offering these tortured souls something they had never expected: the choice to be free. One by one, the trapped consciousnesses began to release their quantum energy, not as weapons of destruction, but as expressions of liberation and hope. Queen Azura supported Marcus through their quantum bond, sharing the burden of communicating with the freed souls while helping him maintain his sanity under the incredible psychic pressure. Together, they became conduits for the greatest act of liberation in galactic history, as billions of enslaved beings finally found peace after millennia of torment. The effect on the superweapon was immediate and dramatic. As the trapped consciousness patterns were freed, the massive crystalline structure began transforming from an instrument of destruction into something entirely different. The quantum matrices that had been designed to unravel star systems instead began generating fields that enhanced communication and understanding between different forms of life. Krek's defenders throughout the shipyard complex stopped fighting as the weapon's transformation flooded their minds with visions of what their ancient technology really contained. For the first time, they understood that their empire had been built on the suffering of others. and that their quest for security through dominance had made them the very monsters they feared becoming. Commander Thrakdur, who had been secretly coordinating with coalition forces, seized the moment to broadcast a message to all Krek's military units. Speaking through the same quantum channels that had carried orders for conquest, he offered his people a different choice, the opportunity to join a coalition built on cooperation rather than continuing a cycle of oppression that had already claimed too many victims. The response wasn't universal, but it was significant. Roughly half of the Krek's fleet laid down their weapons and requested negotiations with coalition representatives. The remainder, led by hardline commanders who refused to accept any alternative to dominance, retreated deeper into their territory to regroup. The war wasn't over, but its character had fundamentally changed from a conflict between species to a struggle between different philosophies of existence. In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself helping to establish the most ambitious diplomatic project in galactic history. The former superweapon became the foundation for a permanent peace conference, its transformed quantum matrices facilitating communication between species that had previously been unable to understand each other. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to work out the practical details of building a truly inclusive galactic civilization. Queen Azura's role evolved once again as she became the first elected president of the Galactic Coalition Council, chosen not because of her royal birth but because of her demonstrated ability to unite diverse species around common goals. Marcus served as her vice president and chief cultural liaison, continuing to bridge differences between civilizations that spanned the spectrum from organic to mechanical, individual to collective, material to energy-based. Their personal relationship deepened as well, transforming from professional partnership to something that transcended traditional categories. They were no longer queen and advisor, but equals who had chosen to face the universe together. Their quantum bond had evolved beyond mere enhanced communication into a true fusion of perspectives that allowed them to function as both individuals and as something greater than the sum of their parts. Years later, when historians attempted to analyze the transformation that had reshaped galactic civilization, they would point to countless factors: technological advancement, political evolution, economic necessity. But those who understood the true story knew that it all began with a simple choice made by one human explorer: the decision to risk everything to save the life of an alien queen. That act of courage had created ripples that spread across the galaxy, proving that individual choices could indeed change the destiny of civilizations. Marcus Chen had started as a dying castaway drifting in the void between stars. He had become something unprecedented, a human who helped reshape the galaxy not through conquest or force, but through the revolutionary idea that different forms of life could choose to work together as equals. Standing beside Queen Azura on the observation deck of their shared station, watching ships from hundreds of worlds arrive for another coalition gathering, he reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this moment. The universe was vast and filled with wonders beyond imagination, but the greatest discovery of all had been learning that courage, compassion, and hope were universal constants that could bridge any gap between different forms of life. As new species continued to join their growing coalition, Marcus knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them, waiting to be discovered by beings brave enough to reach across the void and offer friendship to strangers among the stars.